I wouldn't say product or marketing. I would say product or the brand. And I think we're at a point now in the world where people know marketing is marketing, and then they choose to let it be entertaining or let it be informative. And I think they apply their own filters to how much they want to engage or how much they want to believe. But I think, first and foremost, when you talk about USP, the best USP you can have is innovation, right? And it's like, how do you go to white spaces? How do you provide solutions for consumers in areas of real need state? And then for us, that's where we've decided to steer the company and move the company. When you can start to really understand the consumer's need state and mood state and design and develop products specifically for those spaces, you don't have to hope for, the marketing to deliver that. Obviously, marketing has to do its job, but innovation, just like Nike, gets you, 9/10 of the way there because it's unique, I think. But in addition to that, the reason why I also say brand is because, this category came onto the scene so fast, and there was a lot of fakes. There was a lot of testing that revealed products that didn't even have CBD in it. There were so many areas where consumers lost trust in the category. And you also had retailers who didn't want to miss out on the boom, right? So when you have a consumer that is unsure of what decisions to make and is starting to hear, through e-commerce and all these options of CBD, and then you have a retailer who's like, oh my God, I don't want to miss out on this. That's where I believe the power of brand comes in, because you have trust on the retailer side, you have trust on the consumer side, you have a heritage in the space, and that helps you kind of navigate those conversations with both the consumer and the retailer. And, I think that's why we were the first brands to be accepted in many of the major pharmacy chains in America.
Yeah, look, I think when something new like this comes along in CBD, and I think North America is a little bit further ahead of us in this, but we've developed quite a long way in Europe now in terms of consumer understanding. Brand plays a really important part in building consumer trust, and in the case of Botanic, it's a brand that had customers, had trust, had an understanding of what that brand was about. Therefore, having that sort of understanding gap that exists in CBD was a little bit smaller, because our customers kind of know who we are, we know what we do, and this fitted with that. I think probably the same for George in their products at 4five, in that they bring with them a reputation and an audience from something else. So you can borrow that audience and transfer that message across via that audience. You hear a lot in this industry about people saying, yeah, but you can't make claims and you can't. To be honest, that doesn't really matter. Branding is not about making claims. Branding is about making the consumer believe. And in the case of Botanic, there was an existing audience and an existing brand there. In the case of new brands that we bring to market, we have to do that job again in making consumers understand why that brand exists beyond CBD, so that they can then understand the product. So I think it was very helpful to have a positioning in the market and to have some trust there, and also helpful with buyers, to your previous question, where they kind of know what the business is about, know what the brand is about, know that you can deliver, know that you can do all the kind of boring stuff behind the scenes once you kind of agree to work with them. And I think that trust is important with the retailer and with the consumer. I think one of the challenges here in the UK, in the kind of CBD landscape, has been that some retailers have taken a chance on CBD products that aren't necessarily very well branded, and they haven't moved through retail very quickly. And I think that's damaged the confidence that some of the retailers have in this industry. And we have a job to do now to renew that confidence and encourage the big retailers, that this is an industry they should be backing and getting behind, and it has really got legs to it. And I think we kind of exist at the moment in quite an unprecedented retail landscape. There are global challenges that are affecting retailers and consumers, COVID being the obvious one in the UK, Brexit coming up. These things are very real challenges that retailers face, with changing consumer trends on top of that. And we need to be helping them to find space where consumers can engage and confidence for their consumers. And I think it's also an opportunity for us in this new industry to find ways in which we can help them solve those problems and find relevance in the future.
I think it's important that retailers have to be able to see that pathway, that link of okay, these guys, so yourselves, there is a link there because you've already got that customer base, and therefore, for them, it's an easy insight into how that will then be pushed off the shelves. I think with us, although we hadn't had retail before, I think that, like you say, there's a link between sport and the fact that maybe the values rugby brings and that type of I guess the value sports bring. They can see that there's a crossover there, and therefore there's an obvious marketing play. And for us with Boots, it was a very it was quite an easier process than what we'd imagined. We thought we were going to get grilled, but they were pretty open at the fact that they wanted to see us push. Like you say, you can't talk about CBD too much, but if there's a good enough brand and there's a clear pathway for them to be connected with the retailer and the customer, then they can see that. So for us, it was they wanted to see us use our influencers on in social media and within sport to really shine a light on CBD and its uses. Rather than just saying that we need to know exactly what it does, how it does, it's more the angle of and connecting the dots, really. And that's one thing that, I definitely back you up on that, Rebekah.
If I could add one thing there, I think that, again, I can speak to the U.S. and as we are looking towards Europe, and from my previous world, it seems also relevant in Europe. But, the retailer really they own their consumer, right? As much as the brand says that's their consumer, it's also the retailer's consumer. And the retailer knows their shopping habits. The retailer knows, what they're looking for, how they segment. And I think the more you walk into that conversation, understanding it from the retailer's perspective and understanding how they run their business, how they run their product assortment. And then I think what they're looking to understand is how committed you are towards, your investment in that consumer and your investment in that product portfolio and how many solutions you feel you need that they need filled. So for us, it's always been a conversation of telling our full story and helping the retailers understand exactly how we surround our consumer and what we're doing in our own channels to complement and to drive traffic to their channels. And ultimately, how we understand our consumer who is their consumer. And that's been very successful for us.
I have kind of three levels. I know it sounds crazy, but it's kind of gut intuition at this point as to how I build out, the SKU mix. My focus is skincare, and that's what I do. I'm passionate from the basal layer out and what I can do for beautiful skin. And I've always been that. I focus with natural, organic, clean. We're vegan. That's my foundation. And as a chemist and being the one that actually formulates what I do in the bottle, I've built over the years I have a portfolio of, 14 patents and, 16 patents now and, a formulation base of 5,000 plus formulas. So when I start to build out a brand, I think of, essentials are the first, and then how you build out into a need set based on blemish or mature, and you end up with a brand that's very well-rounded and a go-to brand that fills, we speak to white space, but really fills a need that the customer is needing day in and day out. So my first step is my intuitive gut on what the needs are. And then I really work with my retailers, my buyers, on, what they're seeing is, should be added and how to go about, what products I add. And then, when it comes to evaluation and testing lab samples and how I go through that process, I think by the time I always work on my base first, and by the time I get the base solid, I love my work with essential oils and terpenes. I've been doing that since I was 23. And that's my special blend that I do that, so the bases I'll actually get to the point of they have their essential oils in them. And then I actually open it up to a group of pretty respected peers I have from years of working, colleagues that are in the business. And then kind of a core group, I call them my sensitive bunnies, even though we don't test on animals, but all the people that I hand it to and I go, do you turn red when you use this? And I have like 5 people that I go to and I go, okay, if you turn red, then I have to back off. I've made it a little too crazy strong. So I don't know if I've answered clear, but it's kind of my gut all the way through to retailer. And then, I do have an evaluation group. I have about 50 people that will answer questions for me and do a whole, give me all their feedback.
And I don't think I'm unique in this, and I hope I'm not unique in this, but I think the most important part of marketing testing is doing it and getting it wrong. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't get a product wrong that doesn't work and doesn't land. I think the important thing, you always hear about the success stories, right? And I guess when people listen to these things, they're like, how do you have that magic dust to always get the right product? You don't. You get it wrong, but if you adapt and learn quickly, that's the kind of lesson out of that. You get it wrong, you adapt the product, you change the things that aren't working, you look at the data, you work with the retailer to understand why you think it's not moving or shifting, and you make the changes. And I think that's a constant process. You never get it bang on first time product on the shelf, or very rarely in any case. So I think the most important part of testing a product and getting it to market is actually looking at the data, seeing how it sells and making changes to it to adapt to that.
Well, it's funny. I was taking some notes while I was listening to everybody, and Melissa, you said something. Listen, guys, I thought I hit the lottery when we sold into Alta, because I didn't come from beauty or from CPG. So I'm like, we made it. Game over. Like, no, it was just getting started. The sell-in is one part of the equation. The sell-through is much, much harder, especially when you're dealing with new ingredients. And there's a whole, list of educational needs that your customer needs to understand before they start slathering stuff on their body. Going through the testing, I didn't test on animals as well, but I have three young kids, and those are my test subjects. If it worked on them, we're good to go. But ultimately, you have to listen to. I'm kind of jumping around, but I wanted to jump back in on the buyers too. But you have to listen to the buyers at the end of the day. So the way I approach the sell-in process, or really any goal that I have, it's what's the easiest, most straightforward path to get that yes answer. And it really is making their job as easy as possible. So we're all busy. We all have 20, 30 different things we have going on in our lives. The buyer has that same, it's going through the same, things that we are. So it's really just lining everything up from what your thoughts are, the product mix, the messaging, so then they can say yes or no and not have to put a lot of brain space into that process. Now, going back to your question on the sell-through process, once you get on shelves, it really is learning and listening to the buyer on what is the messaging that's working. So a takeaway that I have right now, what I've heard from the buyers is, CBD, the ingredient CBD, we were about 12 months in of on the shelf educating the consumer. And for any new ingredient or any new brand to really get that adoption rate, it takes about 18 to 24 months to really educate that consumer and build that brand loyalty. We're at 12 months, and then COVID hit. So what that did is it kind of slowed down our trajectory, which was going like this, but it has normalized a little bit for CBD skincare. But what we've done as a differentiator is we use other really great ingredients. Cannuka is cannabis and Manuka honey. I love High Beauty because you don't actually use CBD, and it opens up the way you can market and really promote and really just educate people on the benefits of hemp seed oils. I think that's a whole ingredient story that is amazing in its own right. But for us, the fortunate thing is we had Manuka honey. So as we're seeing the conversation of CBD skincare slow down, we're listening to our buyers because they need to put their dollars to use. The consumer, they're going to go back to something that they've known for years and years because of COVID and the economy is changing. Manuka honey has a lot of education already out there. So we've actually started pivoting our conversation from CBD heavy to then Manuka honey and then CBD, because Manuka honey has a lot of medical, a lot of good skin benefits. It's used in hospitals all across the world. So it's really just kind of listening to your buyer, because they know the consumer. I forget who said it, but they know the consumer actually better than you in their retail, and then, modify your messaging to make sure you're still relevant, and then, kind of go from there. So that's my take. There was a lot there. Sorry, guys.
I'll share a funny one. I'm just going to share a very funny one. I was meeting with Barney's and decided to pop into Bloomingdale's within the same day, and only had a Barney's presentation for a brand that I was developing at the time. And I didn't think of the logos and the whole 9 yards, and thank God I had this relationship in place with the Bloomingdale's buyer. And she goes, Melissa, you're showing me like a Barney's presentation. I go, oh, I just want to be really transparent and let you know this is, where we started our discussion. But in the meantime, I'm turning bright red and literally like, oh my goodness, And again, going back to relationships, thankfully, I had relationships in place. Sadly, Barney's, it's so sad where that's at. But relationships in place where it could just be a conversation and be, I want to give you a sneak peek. But that was one that was kind of crazy. That was not too long ago.
I've got one. This is actually probably 20 years old, but I think it's kind of relevant. Rebekah was saying earlier, Melissa was saying earlier, I used to work at Saatchi & Saatchi on the Tide business, and Tide was launching, I think it was Tide with Downy softener in it. I'm not entirely sure. But, for many of you who are in the US and probably in Europe as well, when you walk into the grocery store or to the pharmacy or to Walmart in this case, Tide has that wall of orange. And P&G was rolling out their next product, and Walmart said, that bottle needs to be blue. And P&G said, no, that bottle's going to be orange. And then Walmart said, well, then that bottle's not coming into Walmart. And that bottle ended up being blue.
Great choice. Love it.
So as Melissa said, you listen to your retail partner.
I mean, look, I've got a book of war stories about retailer interactions. So they, I think, you have to have a very thick skin, as you said. And also, I think here in the UK as well, the churn on buyers is quite quick. So you'll find that, you spend time building a relationship and suddenly they're not there anymore, or they've moved on to the next category. And it's quite soul destroying sometimes. And I think you just have to, you got to stick at it, because success is about being there at the right moment, and kind of eventually the right moment comes and you need to just kind of make sure that you've been persistent with it. But you are going to get a lot of no's, and the no's never stop stinging, right? You just got to dust yourself off and go back another time.
Rebekah, I've got a question for you from someone we're only in a couple of retailers. Is with your relationship with your buyers, I had a piece of advice around not getting too close to them, and then not building a product around what they like, because then the new buyer would come in and then maybe want to put their own stamp on it and not want to part of that product. Is that something you've found, or is that?
Yeah, again, learned the hard way on that, where, I've been doing this for a while and have got close to quite a lot of buyers. You build a very personal relationship with them, which at the time feels like it's great. Every new thing that you do, they want to buy into, but then they're gone and the new buyer wants to put their own stamp on things, and they know you were close to the old buyer. So that kind of degree of personal relationship sometimes isn't that helpful. I think overall what they want to see is they want uniqueness and something that's going to help them stand out. And I think, George, that's why kind of you guys, I think, have been successful in getting into retail. You've got something different that they can kind of showcase without having to kind of build that necessarily that kind of deep personal relationship. So in my experience, it's better to stay a little bit removed and try and focus on bringing them something that's going to make them the hero, right?